Okay, we can probably get started, although I do see a few folks still joining. It's 3 minutes after. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So thanks, Katie. I'm Sam, CEO of Axle AI, and welcome to the winter webinar. Sounds like it should be a corny Christmas song or something, but thankfully the holiday season is already behind us, so it's not. So anyway, thanks for joining. Looks like we have a really good turnout today, and we'll be talking about everything that's new at Axle. Also talk a little bit about some of the things we've seen with our clients, and just ways that our technology is being used out there to help folks get a much better handle on their video content creation. We're going to probably spend the full hour on a combination of introductory material, which I'll keep as brief as possible, and followed by some demos and have a little bit of discussion of some networking setups that work well with Axle. So the demos will be provided by Graham Trail and Patrice Goutabel, and the discussion of the network setups will be Alex Hamilton, who is working with a lot of our customers on this. What I'll try and do is kind of spend 5 or 10 minutes just giving the big picture on our company and kind of how we got here. And then, as I said, I'll be handing it off to other folks as we go. One thing, there is a dialogue box for entering any questions that you may have, and we definitely want to encourage lots of questions during and after the presentations. We're going to try and leave 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, but we can also have Q&A during the PowerPoints and during the demos, and we'll try and answer those either directly in the chat box, or if it's of general interest, we may pause the presentations to cover those as well. So first off, Axle's been around for 7.5 years now. We have over 600 customers of our software globally, and this includes some really big names, some of which you see here, but it also includes a lot of smaller teams and less well-known organizations. We have documentary filmmakers, videographers that just work on a very kind of focused level with certain kinds of customers, all the way up to these mega organizations and multinational companies. So it's really a whole range. One of the interesting things is video teams seem to operate pretty similarly regardless of the size of the company they're in. So a documentary team that's just working on a project with 5 people does not look that different in our experience from, let's say, a corporate video team of 15 people. It's just the budgets might be a little different, but a lot of the workflows are very similar. And the challenge is that video editing is basically like working in a cave. You can't find, as you know, you can't find anything when you need it. There's a lot of time spent hunting around. Traditionally, that was done with like videotape and loose hard drives. More recently, people are consolidating more of their storage because the storage is getting more affordable. You used to have to buy a big expensive SAN, and that's no longer necessary. Nowadays, there's off-the-shelf NAS and SAN products. But even with the best hardware, up to 40% of editors' time is just spent finding the material. Simply because the file names are confusing, it's not well marked, it's not tagged, it's not searchable. And despite that challenge, tons and tons of people have this problem. Today, it's about 300,000 video teams worldwide, and that number is expected to double by 2024 to close to 2/3 of a million. Obviously, further into the decade, it'll probably be over 1 million teams worldwide that have these types of challenges. And one of the big trends is, even though video is taking off, it's becoming easier and easier to do, so more people are doing it. The cost of the tools needed to both store and manage the content are dropping dramatically. And here we're talking about things like the cost of disk storage, the cost of high-speed networking, archiving, AI tools for searching and analyzing the content, they're all getting more powerful and cheaper very quickly. This is what our software looks like. I won't dwell on this slide for too long because Graham and Patrice will be getting into much more detail. But in general, we just try and keep it simple enough that anybody who knows how to use, let's say, Dropbox or Google Drive will feel right at home. That's one of the big accomplishments I think that we did do early on, was to simplify this stuff. It used to be the province of big, expensive NAM systems, and we've been able to bring it down to the level that a 2 or 3 person team can benefit from it almost right away with no training. There are other big differences between Axel and a traditional MAM, and we'll be talking more about those, but simplicity is probably the first one that comes to mind. So this slide kind of explains how everything works. The core is that front end that I just showed you, and we'll be demoing in much more detail. But layered on top of that, we also have the ability to plug in multiple AI modules, both from partner vendors, people like Microsoft and Google, but also of our own design and using modern machine learning frameworks. So in the last year, we've progressed from basically being dependent on 1 or 2 outside vendors for the AI capability, but at a significant cost to our customers, to try to bring that cost down. And we late last year introduced our Axel Speech and Ascribe products that get the cost, for instance, of transcription in 6 languages down to under $2 an hour, which is a really dramatically different price point from what people are used to, and hopefully will let people transcribe a lot more content. Underneath the AI and the front end, we have our connector framework, which we'll be touching on later in the call. This is basically a way to build custom workflows visually without having to do much programming. And it's been a huge game changer in that it lets non-technical people build very powerful tools to, for instance, transcode video, move it, notify people, do checksums, things like that. So we'll get into that towards the end of the call, because it is kind of geekier than most of what we do. And then finally, and not least, Axel is a low impact product. It doesn't require you to do anything different than you do today. So unlike a MAM, which would typically make you copy all your material to a new location and then organize it differently and restrict you to certain formats, we basically catalog everything in place exactly the way you have it. So it's a huge advantage not only for us, but for our clients. It simplifies the deployments, reduces the cost, and generally keeps it light so that you can get the benefits of these kinds of systems without having to spend the sorts of time and money that would be associated with a traditional MAM. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Graham for the demo of Axel. And then after that, we'll go to Alex to talk about some of the network configurations that kind of make this possible. Graham, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, everyone. As Sam said, my name is Graham. I'll be happy to show off a demo of the Axel interface and how you can use the software. This will kind of be building off of Sam's introduction. Should take around 15 minutes, so not going to be a super deep dive, but enough to get you to understand what our software is and how you can use it. So what we should be seeing here is kind of the standard Axel view. A few things to note right off the bat. One is that this is in a web browser. I'm using Safari in this case, although we support Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, all the modern web browsers. And the idea behind the web browser interface is that once Axel is set up on your system, there's no additional software to install or maintain or update. Rather, any device that's on the network can access Axel through the web browser and start taking advantage of that capability right away. The folders that we're seeing here are a direct recreation of what's on my media storage. So when you set up Axel, you can tell it what locations on your storage you want it to monitor. And that could be an entire NAS volume. It could be a specific subfolder, you can choose the scope that makes sense for you and the workflow that you want to support. And Axel will scan that location, recreate it in the browser so that you can browse it without even direct access to that media storage. Again, you could be on your smartphone, you could be on a laptop not connected to anything but the Axel network, and you'd be able to start browsing your media storage and the files. When Axel sees compatible media files, meaning video, images, PDFs, or audio files, it'll automatically make a proxy. And that's what we're seeing here. This is a bunch of video proxies. I can see thumbnail previews as I scrub the cursor over this proxy in the top row there. And of course, I can click any of these assets to go to a dedicated video player where I'll be streaming the proxy. Again, no connection to the original storage is necessary, and I'm not trying to stream the original media file over the network, which can be slow. It can add additional pressure on that storage device, which should be used for editing. Rather, everything is coming off of Axel's proxy system so that I can play it back in the browser without needing to wait for loading or buffering or anything like that. It means you can also have a lot of people accessing the system at once and not slowing everything down. Now, the heart of Axel is enabling you to find the media you need when you need it. And we have a multi-pronged approach to that. You can add your own custom metadata fields to the system and then add data for any of those fields to any of your files. If I select this file, you'll see this column on the right fills in. In fact, I'm going to make this bigger here. And so this allows you to see the custom metadata fields you've created right here. So some examples include project, location, events. And again, these are fields that I've added to my system. This doesn't come built into Axel. You don't have to use these fields. It's a very flexible system. You just build the fields that are relevant to you. What we do provide are different metadata types. And so when you create a field, it's going to be one of these different types. Now you'll see how that works. So I click the edit button. Each of these fields is a little bit different. Project is a text field, meaning I can type whatever I like directly into it. It's very flexible. Location is a drop-down menu. I've predefined a list of items, and then I can choose one of those as the correct value for this field. Similarly, there's events, which is a multi-select. I can highlight multiple options out of a pre-made list. We support calendars for dates. We have a large text field. You can see once I select this, it expands to fill the whole column. Remember, things like line breaks. And we also have checkboxes, which are like binary, yes, no, quick categorization kind of fields. So you can mix and match all of these different fields. So you can have something really simple, like maybe it's just a large text field where you type in keywords, or maybe it's something more complex like I have here, where you have multiple field types. You could have 3 text fields, 2 drop-down menus for multi-selects, 2 calendars. You can really mix and match the different field types, create your own labels, create your own answers to create the metadata layout that's going to work for you. And when I hit save, that locks in this information for that file. And you can edit the metadata for multiple files at once. You can edit the metadata for all the files in a single folder at once. So it's very easy to apply a lot of this custom metadata to your files. Now, this kind of metadata, what I've been calling custom metadata, is kind of the classic model. It's where a person ahead of time thinks about the fields that they want to use to organize the information and then fills in the actual data for each field. Now, what's been rising and what Sam talked about a little bit is artificial intelligence. And so we've tried to bring that into the metadata space by either integrating with partners that can provide AI solutions or providing our own AI solutions. So our biggest partner is Microsoft. They have a platform called Video Indexer. And this is a very robust, very, very wide scale solution that does things like facial recognition, audio transcription, object recognition, and more. And we're also rolling out our own solution, starting with Axel Speech, but also, which is the transcription that Sam was talking about earlier. But it also will include facial recognition, object recognition, and more very soon. So we're kind of working both with outside partners when appropriate, and also developing our own technology. So all of this is built into the Axel product on a fundamental level. When you want to analyze a file, you can select one or more, of course, go to our menu and choose Analyze Videos. You'll then be able to choose which service you'd like to use. Again, it could be Microsoft Video Indexer, it could be one of the Axel services, and then proceed with the analysis of that video. What will happen is the file will be uploaded to wherever the analysis takes place, Microsoft, with our services, wherever, and that data will then be downloaded back into Axel. That's visible in the sidebar as well as in the proxy view. So this file, for example, I can see the timeline data section here, and this includes things like facial recognition and so on. But it's a little easier to see if I go straight into the proxy, so that's what we're going to do. This file has gone through the video indexer, and that means it has the facial recognition and some of these other features, so I can use that to show off what that looks like. This is an ad for a music festival, and so there are a lot of celebrities and musicians and people like that. And so it does recognize right off the bat who they are: Bruno Mars, Diplo, Harry Styles, and so on. And if I want to see where they are in the video, I can use the little gray marker. That shows me where in the video it is, or if I click it, it'll jump me straight to that location. So I can see that Justin Timberlake shows up near the end here. Axel also gives you the ability to rename the labels that are used, and that's very helpful for most of our customers because they're not working with, Harry Styles or Justin Timberlake. They're working with their own people. A Microsoft AI isn't going to know who they are ahead of time. So you can go ahead and add in your own name and teach the system to recognize those people. And it'll still do all of the facial recognition, but now applying the correct name. And this kind of format is common across all of these sections. You'll see what's being identified. For example, this is annotations like object and scene recognition. So you'll see what exactly is being identified and then where in the video that it appears. So I can see that baseball shows up near the beginning here, and I can click that. And sure enough, it takes me to this little baseball game they're using here in this ad. So I can see that baseball is happening. I can see where exactly that is in the video and jump to it. The transcript, and this is similar to what you'll see with Axel Speech as well. We divide the video into these little chunks. Each chunk is a phrase from the transcript. And you can click any of these sections. You can see it play here. You can edit all of this text. You can also export it as a text file or an SRT file to use in other contexts. So it's very flexible. You can always make any adjustments you need to and get the data out of there to use elsewhere. And all of this information is searchable. So it's kind of the end game of all of this metadata, either what was added yourself through the custom metadata or the metadata generated by an AI analysis. It all becomes part of a searchable database, which you could then use to find your footage. The search bar always lives here at the top of the screen. If I want to find Justin Timberlake, for example, I know he's in this video. I see that come up right as a result just by typing in his name. So this is kind of a very basic example of how the search could work. It could also be used as a refinement tool. So I could do a search for something I know is fairly common in my system, like Boston, and I get a fair amount of results back here. So rather than kind of looking through all of these for exactly what I want, I can add additional terms that will narrow that down. So for example, one of my events is gold. So I can add that. And I'm only seeing files that have both Boston and gold together in some way. And I can keep adding new terms to continually refine and get more and more specific results. That's another way to use the search. And then lastly, we have an advanced search. And this allows you to specify the exact fields you're interested in searching. And that can range from, for example, the Axel Speech transcript. If you want to look for a key phrase or statement that was made that's been picked up by the AI, you can do that. Any of your own custom metadata, for example, and you can put all of these together. So let's say I want to combine a particular location, which contains New York City, a particular event, or maybe I want to exclude an event. So I can change it to does not contain a pass, and I want to make sure someone says "full" in the background, so I'm going to look for that in my transcript. So you can combine all of these elements together to create a search that will only show you the results that match all of these criteria. When you run a search, you can also save it. That's what we call a smart filter. This gets added to the list here on the left, and you can run that search again with a single click. I've seen like a lot of kind of little things come in the chat, so I'm going to quickly check it out, see if there's anything I can show off to you guys. Okay, looks like Patrice is on top of these, so that's great. So the last thing I want to talk about here before I'll continue handing on to Alex is our integration with editors. So once you run the search, you find the footage that you want. Well, how do you deliver that? How do you turn that into something that you can then present? So we have an integration both with Premiere and with Final Cut Pro. Both of them have an XML export option. And what that means is you can select files in Excel and add them to what we call bins. These are just virtual folders for holding subclips, which are just virtual markers. So you're not duplicating media, you're not copying anything. You're just kind of creating these markers. So it can either be a full clip like I'm doing here, or if I go into any specific file, I can also highlight a beginning and end point, and you can also see text notice on here. I can highlight a beginning and end point and then store that as a subclip as well. So if I go to one of my bins, for example, you can see what that looks like. And I have a mix of files that were, the whole thing was selected as a subclip, or ones where only a small sub-selection was. You can see that highlighted in blue there. So from here, I can export an XML file either for Premiere or Final Cut Pro 7 or 10. And that will just, once I import that XML file, that will tell the editor to go to the original media storage and import the original high-resolution media off the storage for editing. The other method is so far unique for Premiere, although we're working on a Final Cut version, and that is a panel that I can set up inside the editor. It allows me to log into a version of the Axle interface inside the editor itself that has all my catalogs and bins. It has a search bar I can use. So I can navigate through the catalogs, I can play back proxies, I can search for files that I need to, maybe play back the proxy there to make sure I found the right one, and then with a single click, import the selected files into the current project. So once you build up that level of metadata in the system, you can actually stay within the editing environment itself and just use that panel to find the footage you need based on that metadata, and then import it so that you can go ahead and not need to jump back and forth between the browser and the editor. All right, since I I am kind of showing off the interface, I'll leave it open for a few more minutes for any other questions about that. Otherwise, next up is Alex talking about some of our networking options.
So it looks like we have a question about Avid support.
Yeah, I can take that one. So, Leandro, thanks a lot for your question. Yes, this is something we are currently working on. It is not finalized. What you will see at first by NAB this year would be the possibility to index Avid workspaces, where we are going to show you master clips previews rather than all the different add-ons that are returned by that are necessary in the Avid environment. And later on, what we will want to do is, in addition to the export of XML that you see in Axle for Premiere and Final Cut Pro 10, we will also include an AAF file that will be for Media Composer.
Thanks, Patrice. And it looks like we just have another question. Is drag and drop from the browser to a bin FCPX or Premiere Pro an option? And this might be a good time to show the Premiere panel.
Yes, definitely. So yes, drag and drop is an option in the Premiere panel. Let's see, we wanted to talk about the...
But not from the browser, though. Not from the browser, though. I feel like that's important to have.
Oh, yes, from the panel. So I can, Graham, if you release the screen, I would be happy to jump into Premiere and show the integration that we have and what is new with Axle this year and the Premiere panel. So jumping into Premiere, the extension, if you are already familiar with the Premiere panel, you will not be lost. It is exactly the same interface, but we have actually tightened the integration, where if I were to take a clip that has been analyzed, and for that I'm just going to jump into my Excel system, and we are going to look for clips that have been analyzed. So I do know, for example, that in my interviews clip here, this file has been analyzed, where I have both Microsoft facial recognition and the actual speech. So we will see both cases. And the idea is, if I were to perform a search and find this interview, let's say, for example, Lewis Hamilton, who is actually appearing, you will see that I bring in multiple clips into my Premiere panel. And I can select one or two, and I can drag them straight into my Premiere. What is cool is, as you notice now, we are bringing markers inside the clip. And these are all the AI tags. So once it finishes to load, it will take just be a minute. I will show you the different markers that we have in Premiere, and you will see we will have facial recognition and transcripts. So all the AI tag elements that we have brought up, it's very hard to see, but you will have face, transcript, actual speech. So you will have different markers shown. And now this is available for search inside Premiere. If I were to be able to search right here, it would be able to find me the information. So this is brand new with the Premiere panel. Same thing with the bin that Graham mentioned earlier. So going back, you have access also to the project area where you can bring in the bin, so you don't need to generate an XML. And this has been the quick overview of the Premiere panel. And
Great.
with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Sam and Alex. Thanks a lot, guys.
Super. All right, thanks. Let me just reshare desktop here, and we will go to the slides about configuration. So one of the questions that we get is, how does this all work? Like, how do I run it? And is it cloud? Do I run it on site? The short answer to that is, currently you run it on site, but we do have virtual machine versions, and it is sort of trending in the direction of hybrid cloud setups. But for the details about configs, I'm going to hand it over to Alex Hamilton. Alex?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. So as you can see here, the basic network configuration it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty inexpensive, frankly. For the majority of our customers, the new Mac Mini is a real kind of a dream machine. 6-core, the 3.2 gigahertz i7 model, 16 gigs of RAM. But most important, well, not most importantly, but very importantly, getting the 10 gigabit Ethernet card and support there, and making sure that the Axel server is connected to the storage via 10 gig. So that will make your proxy generation, transcoding process work really, really well. For storing all that stuff, a basic Thunderbolt or USB drive will work great. And for us, the majority of our customers seem to be very well served by the 6 or 8 terabyte drives that are very commonplace today, whether it's GTech or, there's a number of options there. And as you can see, for regular HD, 10% of your for every 10 terabytes of master files, you're going to need about 10% out of a single terabyte for your proxy generation. Ultra UHD files, you get a slightly better compression rate, so it goes down closer to 5%. So that's the big thing. But on making sure you're connected to the storage quickly, as fast as your system will support, is definitely a key configuration issue that you need to address. So, next slide, please. Yeah, so once you go to for our bigger customers and people using RED and other 4K formats, you're really going to need a little bit more horsepower here. And for those, we've seen that the new, either the iMac Pro and obviously the new Mac Pros that we don't have a lot of experience with yet, but when you go to the 12 or the 18 core machines, add a little bit more RAM, you're definitely, that's where you're going to get the payback from our systems in terms of being able to support those more complex. Again, transcoding is where the heavy lifting is going on to make those proxies. Once you have that done, frankly, the system is fairly lightweight, but it's it doesn't take a lot. And as you can see, we're doing a 1 megabit per second proxy, so it doesn't. You're not going to load your network heavily, even if multiple people are browsing the file simultaneously. So that's kind of a that's one of the nice things about it. So you're not too, it's not going to be a heavy drag on your network, even if you have multiple users digging around in there looking for files and stuff like that. So next slide. So one thing that, originally when we came out with Axle, the idea was everybody was sitting in the same office and, working inside the firewall. And still that's how a lot of people work. But obviously people work remotely, either on site where a shoot's taking place, or they're working at home. They're not in the office that day. So we've got two different options available for people that are working remotely. One that's become quite, for one-on-one type access to the system, installing a virtual private network or so-called VPN connection is, it used to be a bit complicated. Frankly, it's incredibly simple. I installed one for $50 a year called Tunnel Bear. There are many options out there at the same price and performance, but basically that creates a secure connection between you and the Axle server, so you don't have to worry about compromising security. Great for one-on-one. But as you can see here, you might need multiple people and multiple things. We've now got the ability to essentially copy the Axle database into real time using what we call the reverse proxy system. And so what this allows you to do really is simultaneously see from outside the firewall a copy of the Axle database and browse through that, irrespective of where you're at, going through a URL. So it's a great way, to again, the whole game here is not to expose your Axle server or your network to any security threats, but also obviously to provide access to the system as people need it from remote, locations. So now we've got, what are both pretty inexpensive and very secure options for seeing what you've got inside your Axle library. So that's kind of it. Time for Ascribe.
I'm on mute. Sorry, I'm back. Thanks, Alex. That was super helpful. And if there are questions about networking and configurations, definitely feel free to use the chat window. It's probably also a good time to mention that our email addresses at Axle are very straightforward. So Alex's is just alex@axle.ai. I'm Sam at axle.ai. Patrice, Graham, Katie, who led things off, we're all just first name at axle.ai. And so if we do run out of time or you have additional questions after the webinar ends, feel free to reach out. Another just brief not caveat, but another thing to mention before we go on is, in addition to the different Mac configurations all the way up through the new Mac Pro, we also now support Linux hardware. Mostly for the high end. We have very large customers that demand, large amounts of scalability, tons of transcoding, and sometimes they have IT, in-house IT requirements that all servers be in a, rack-mounted configuration. Now, obviously, the new Apple Mac Pro with the rack mount chassis, which just actually started shipping a few days ago, is pretty exciting that way. So we haven't had a good rack mount option in the Mac family for a decade or more, going back to the old Xserves. So this is really cool. And Axle used to rely on Mac Minis. Our customers got bigger and bigger and needed more and more horsepower. But the lack of a real rack mount Apple product was the limitation. We do have this Linux support. We've done a number of deployments on, for instance, HP servers, HPE, the new Gen 10 machines. And in general, we're hardware independent. We run as a CentOS virtual machine that you can deploy either on-premise or in a hosted facility. But those tend to be, more complex discussions and not quite the same, double-click install it experience that we like to have with Axle. The goal with Axle itself is that you should be able to install it in less than an hour, a little bit of remote help from us over TeamViewer, and have everything up and running just as if you run any other Mac app. And that's just for the one Mac that's doing the serving. The other clients, whether Macs, PCs, or mobile devices, are simply accessing it through the browser or through the Adobe Premiere panel that Patrice was showing. So I think that's probably enough on the big picture of configuration and larger setups. Going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about Ascribe, which is our newest product. It just came out 2 months ago. And the concept behind it was that, yes, we made it radically simple and much more affordable to do these high-end media management things like having searchable video and transcripts, face recognition. But for most videographers, even that is too heavy duty. If you're just going around with a MacBook Pro, you have a bunch of material, you may just want to get a transcript so that you can find the right place in the footage. And that's the problem that Ascribe solves. And it runs as a plugin inside both the Windows and the Mac versions of Adobe Premiere Pro, CC. It is free, and it comes with 1 hour of free transcription. And as Patrice will be showing you in a moment, it's quite high quality transcription, but the cost is under $2 per hour, which compared to traditional transcription services that charge $1 or $2 a minute, it's really a game changer. So we, in addition to doing what it does, being free, plugging into Premiere, we also see it as kind of an on-ramp to our wider range of solutions. And with that, I think I'll have Patrice do the honors and demo Ascribe for you.
Thank you, Sam. If you can just stop sharing your screen, I will be able.
I'm just switching over. Sorry, it took a second here.
No worries at all. But with all this pumped up description, I hope the demo is going to be as good. So yeah, so Ascribe. One thing to note is currently it is available on Premiere Pro, but we want to expand to much more platforms, starting with the Mac app version standalone, independent of Axle, Windows, and so on. And the features are going to be pretty much the same. So here I am in Premiere, and I'm just going to launch the panel. It is embedded in Premiere. I can dock it just like anything else in Premiere. And let me just take this clip. So what is cool is you know how many minutes you have left in your plan when you sign up with Axle. And you don't have to do the whole bit. I can actually choose in and out points easily from my Premiere. We can choose different languages. We support 6 languages, 2 flavors of English, so in reality 7. Different languages. You pick your language, you have selected the in and out points in your clip, and you launch a transcription. The first thing we are going to do is create an audio file for the segment that we have selected using Adobe Media Encoder. And when that is ready, it is being set to be transcribed. And here we go, you have the transcription. So now how do we keep track? Because there's not really a database inside Premiere Pro. Well, we are going to embed the markers with the transcription. So markers are pretty key here. So if I were to check again the markers, you will see the Ascribe transcript, all the information. I can either edit straight from here. So for example, I see the I is not capitalized. I can capitalize the I here. And when I hit refresh, it will update from the markers. Or I can simply click on it and edit whatever I need to edit. And so going back to the project, I am done with editing, and now I'm happy with it. I have different export options. I can export as an SRT file, and I'll just place it in my desktop for ease of access. And here I have my SRT file. That's not it. Here we go. So, no, where is my SRT file? Let's try again. Export. Oh yes, because I'm not in desktop. Ta-da. So now that I have my SRT file and I go to the correct location, I can bring the SRT straight into, I can bring my SRT straight into Premiere. And here I am. Now I have the SRT. Clearly some formatting issues, but that's something with Premiere. But now that I have my SRT file, I can basically bring it over and take the SRT, bring it right here. And now I have my bit available. So let's just do a little bit of, so I'm dealing with that. Should be able to move it up a little bit. Here we go. I just scale it down. We're going to center it, so we play a little bit with it, and here we go. And I have my transcripts. And so all of that was pretty much effortless. You know, I have a transcript for less than $2 an hour of footage analyzed. And what is cool is we actually start to transcribe as we receive the file. So you're really limited to the upload speed once the audio file has been rendered. And these have been a quick introduction to the Ascribe Premiere panel. Same on both Mac and Windows. You can also export a TXT file or a VTT. It's an HTML5 video player captioning track. So you just place it next to your file, you call it in your code, and it will load directly as a subtitle. And of course, I can search for the bits and filter anything in my transcript to go and edit. And that has been described. And with that, I will hand it back over to Sam.
All right, so we're back on the slides. We're getting towards the end of the presentation. Actually, I think we're pretty well on schedule. The questions have been great, by the way, and we really appreciate those. And I think what we'd like to do at this point is just talk about our third product, connectr, and also maybe just give you a sense of the company in a little more detail. Patrice will be wrapping up with a demo of connectr, and there may be questions about that, but I think we've got enough time, so we should be good. So connectr, we launched this in late 2018, and it's essentially a visual workflow tool for media. So you can drag and drop modules on your screen. They can be things like transcoding, file copies, notification, MD5 checksums, and also integrations with a variety of applications, not only our own Axel Media Management, but also third-party applications like ArchiWare, File Catalyst, and so on. There are versions of connectr that run on both Mac OS and Linux. And we've seen in some of our larger sites that it's been a very valuable tool. Just in the last year, we've done deployments at a large European broadcaster, Mediaset in Italy, and also a major sports league here in the US that both were really hinged on having connectr. Now, the reason we did connectr is that Axel itself, Axel 2019 and Axel 2020, are MAMs in one sense, but they're not like a MAM in a few key areas. One is that they, as I mentioned earlier, they do not rely on any changes in your storage setup. But the other big difference is that they don't expect a lot of customization. So historically, if you would buy a MAM, it would come with weeks or even months of very hands-on adaptation to your workflows. And the problem with that is that when you're done, you don't have a standard product anymore. And in fact, when the MAM vendor upgrades, you often have to spend as much time redoing all those integrations as you did when you started. And our goal with Axel was really not to be that. It was to be much more of an off-the-shelf product. But there are all kinds of requests. I want a workflow that'll grab this subclick here, render it out as an H.264, or I don't know, name your format, copy it over there, change the aspect ratio, etc. And that's what connectr is designed to do. And it runs independent of Axel AI. You can actually have a connectr instance that just minds its own business and works all day long and doesn't talk to anybody's media management. So it's pretty powerful that way. And also cost. It starts at under $2,500. Most of the products like this, things like Telestream Vantage or Aspera Orchestrator, have generally cost 10 times as much as that. So it's very affordable. It's very lightweight. It kind of fits with our philosophy of openness, and it's definitely kind of a geek tool in that it's not the thing that most end users will want to use every day, but behind the scenes it can be saving them a huge amount of repetitive labor. And before we get to that demo, I just want to highlight one other thing, which is our team. These are some of the folks that you've been hearing on the phone, and let's see, basically our email addresses are all just first name @axel.ai. So feel free to reach out and contact any of us after the webinar. And, we definitely look forward to hearing from you. I'll also just put up my contact information, and that phone number for those of you not in North America is just +1 and then the area code. So with that, I will do a final handoff here to Patrice, and we will stay available to answer questions right till the end of the hour. But Patrice, over to you and connectr.
Thank you, Sam.
I think you're on mute.
Yes, I was on mute. Great. Indeed. Thank you, Sam. I was wondering if everybody was bored by my accent. So this is connectr, independent of Axel or anything else, really. And the goal is to really create rules and automate workflows to simplify your life. Now, I'm not going to spend time designing workflows, but just to give you a rough idea of what you can do, you can manipulate data. And we understand a whole range of information that goes from array, string, JSON, XML, connect to database, do file manipulation, network operations such as upload to FTP, do movie transcoding, router controlling, and everything. So there is a lot actually happening with connectr. And basically, if I were to take one bit, so let's take, for example, a file copy right here, you will see that I have a building block where you will have arrows. These arrows are basically how I am going to manage the flow. And let's picture, for example, that the copy failed. Well, I can just send an email to say this copy failed. And this is how I will design the workflow. If it is successful, I can perform another task or stop right here. And you have circles, which we call ports. And this is basically how you will manipulate data and transfer data from one unit to the other. And you can also save the data output by any building blocks. And this is going to basically get there. Can be reused. So let me just open a couple projects, and let's start very simple. Let's just start with, I have a watch folder, and you will see that I have stored information and pass it along right here. And for each file that I have found, I am going to basically do a checksum. I can choose the flavor, SHA1 or MD5, and I will make a copy where I want to check the file. I want to make sure that the file has been copied properly. And you will see that I pass along information from one block to another. And I'm just going to run the project. So I have a watch folder that is always a connectr watch folder in my computer. So just going to take small videos so we don't spend the time wondering. And I'm going to connector watch folder, copy. And I'm just going to trigger now. I have a button here, I'm going to trigger. And you will notice when I trigger that there will be pulse going around to tell you where we are in the project. And here we go, the files have been copied successfully. And if I check my output, I have the new files and they have been copied and verified. And I can repeat that multiple times. So I can have 2 verified copies going around, very useful in terms of ingest. So very small project. Let me show you one where we can actually expand Axel's capabilities now. And for that, I'm just going to trigger a render of a file using Axel. Now I'm going every second to my Axel system, perform specific searches, take the results, and what I will do is grab the path of the file and just transcode. And when I'm done, I will just reset the metadata value so I do not constantly create it. If I fail, I will send an email. Then when I'm done, I'm going to the second criteria of my search right here, down below. And I move, and same thing. And this time I'm going to use FFmpeg to render, because we can use FFmpeg. So if you're familiar with scripting in FFmpeg, apply filter and everything else, you can go for it. And if it fails, I'm going to send a text message now using iMessage. Running the project, now every second I'm going to pulse and check everything in my Axel system. And I'm going to just go inside the folder. I'm doing very short videos. I'm going to clean that out. And I will take the multiple hot air balloon, edit the metadata, convert video to 1080p, save. And when I jump back to my connector, it found the file and it started to render the new clip. So now suddenly I have the possibility to trigger render. And another cool thing about connector, I showed you some very brief stuff, but one thing that is very cool, if you need to have 2 applications talking to each other using a REST API, you do not need to wait for the vendor to talk to each other. You can do it yourself straight from connector. It understands and make API requests. And speaking of API, there is a API also on connector to remotely trigger workflows as well. And with that, I saw a lot of chats going around. I'm going to take a quick peek, but feel free to ask any questions.
Thanks, Patrice. And a few other points about connector. Maybe you could just scroll through some of the modules to give a feel for the kind of breadth of what's supported, but it's everything from like, you know, Excel spreadsheet input to
Yes.
emails to SMS text, you know, just tons and tons of plugins. And so it's like a Swiss Army knife that really lets you connect almost anything to anything. We think it's very powerful, and obviously not for everyone, but if you need it a lot. And you know, the capabilities are not restricted in any way.
Yes.
And it's a perpetual license. So
just to give you a quick example, not to scare everybody here, but this is one workflow, for example, based on specific, yep. Yeah, exactly. So this is based on the movie height and width, and depending on some criteria, how do I render my clip? And I have all these different rules that have been set up, which height, when I get to which height, I'll get the width, and I decide if the file exists or not. Either I do a normal transcoding, or I will just grab the left tile where I will do some cropping. And
this was done for a major VR company, by the way. That was another big project.
Exactly.
Connector, yeah. And
they don't need to worry about which file goes where or whatnot. It's only one watch folder. The rest is taken care of specifically for them. They don't need to worry. They know that whatever they get in the end is going to be the correct output.
Hey, I know it doesn't make much difference on this one. Can you show the streamlined view where it hides all the unused ins and outs?
We can definitely try that. So you can hide the non-used ports. It makes it a little bit easier to read.
Still pretty complex though.
Let's take the watch folder transcode. The watch folder transcode is actually better organized. And I can definitely just hide non-used ports, and you will see that it looks much better and easier to understand. Key is to just leave annotations so you know what is happening. And lastly, you can enable stepping, so you can run step by step to understand what is happening in the workflow. So you can.
For those of you that are integrators or engineers, definitely check with us. We can get you evaluation versions of the software and so forth.
Mhm.
So happy to have, and that's true, by the way, of Axle AI, and of course, Ascribe is all about try before you buy. So really, with all these products, just let us know what your interest is. It's been a very busy January so far, following a very busy December. So we hope it continues like that, and we'd love to hear from anybody on this call going forward. So with that, I think we need to wrap it up. But thanks everybody for your time, and totally appreciate all the great questions that we had. Oh, there was one question about integration with Microsoft Teams. We have not done anything explicitly, but it's an example of the kind of thing that you could do with connectors REST API. So, we'd have to look into that a little bit, but it should be possible. All right, thanks all. And again, more questions welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much.